Before the pandemic, nail salons were viewed as a growing industry, along with being important to neighborhood economies and social fabric. That's why so many people were deeply affected when the pandemic resulted in shutdowns, followed by a halting recovery. The state of those businesses and their workers was recently highlighted in a report by VietAID and the Asian Outreach Unit of Greater Boston Legal Services. To tell us about the report are two guests from GBLS, the unit's Paralegal and Organizing Fellow, also with VietAID, Thao Ho, and staff attorney, Janet Vo. I'd like to thank you both very much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Chris.
I have to start with Thao, because one of the things I noticed about this report, this isn't about things getting worse during the pandemic. This is about a very challenging situation, especially for workers going back for quite a long time, isn't it?
Yes, very much so. And it's interesting because the nail salon industry has served as such a foundation for the Vietnamese community, nationally and also within our state for so long. So we understand that the struggles within the industry reflects struggles within the broader Vietnamese community as well, such as the language barriers that we were seeing during the pandemic when folks were accessing benefits. Those language barriers have always existed because of the lack of workforce development programs that benefited Vietnamese community members, and also because of the fact that there is no true support. There isn't strong support for limited English proficient speakers in our community.
I'll turn to Jennifer. What's also going on in this industry, and this is not exclusive to nails, and it's not exclusive to Asian immigrants either, but we're talking about one thing a lot of immigrants do face. They're working at the margins of the economy where there's less protection and maybe a lot of pressure. Can you explain what they're up against?
Yes, thank you, Chris. This industry is quite vulnerable, and like you said, it's not unique to just the nail salon industry. These workers in this industry, even prior to the pandemic, it's a close contact industry where workers are exposed every day to potentially toxic chemicals, or even just close proximity to customers that has made them more vulnerable generally to potential risk in the workplace. And this industry itself too, one of the challenges is just the wage system, and it's a seasonal economy essentially. At least nail salon workers in Massachusetts, many of the ones that we have interviewed and worked with in the last few years, we've seen that they're in a commission-based system that is generally based on workers receiving income by the volume of people that come in through the door. And when the pandemic hit, that basically shut down entirely. There was no income for both small business owners and for workers. And that has generally hurt the community because a lot of workers prior to that were not familiar with programs such as unemployment benefits. And that goes hand in hand with some of the things that Thao had mentioned, was language barriers for these communities. The reasons why they enter into the nail salon industry often is because of low barriers of entry due to lower education attainment, and also because of language barriers.
What I also picked up from the report is that a lot of these workers are not classified for tax purposes as employees, and that has consequences. Explain why that's a problem.
Yes, thank you, Chris. And so misclassification typically occurs when employers are identifying employees or workers as independent contractors. So often the scenarios you'll see is that workers may receive a 1099 at the end of the year, or instead of a W-2. And W-2, what happens typically is that workers will have taxes withdrawn from their paychecks, but then what happens is that instead in the next year, the following year when they file taxes, what happens is that workers lose out because they have to pay taxes on the Medicare taxes, and also they lose out on many benefits that are given to workers who are generally correctly classified. For example, access to unemployment insurance if they are laid off or fired from their job, or have to quit due to a compelling reason, or they might have access to workers' compensation, and they would also be if they got injured on the job, that would help them essentially. And unfortunately, it's a problem that has persisted in this industry. It's like ongoing nationally and in Massachusetts. And sometimes it's because of misunderstanding by owners and workers about what that structure, what the correct way is to pay workers. And one of the goals of our project and our report is to highlight this issue so that we can help educate owners and also workers about the unemployment system and also the different benefits of being on being correctly classified as a employee versus a independent contractor.
Thao, I imagine that some people who just start out in salons might even see them as lucrative, at least during the busy times, but in the long run, they can also be a trap. So you've got some recommendations in this report to make them less of a trap and more of at least part of a pathway to a better life. Share some of those recommendations with us.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Chris. And I think one thing I would like to emphasize on that Janet brought up that does like very much resonate with this question is the fact that many folks enter this industry because of the low barriers of entry and because there's such a strong Vietnamese network within the nail salon industry already. And at the same time, you know, they're like just with any other industry, right? Some folks like love their job and some folks really don't love their job. But either way, like many folks do feel stuck because of language barriers, because of lack of initial capital to actually like go much further in the industry, and also because of the restrictions of their own personal lives, whether that be the fact that they appreciate the flexibility in their scheduling, whether that be they need to like provide childcare or informal types of care to other relatives in their family. And all these factors make it so that the nail salon industry is much more conducive to community members who enter the industry. But at the same time, we see that workers who don't necessarily see them want to be nail salon workers are stuck in the industry because of these barriers, while workers who want to build their own business and have their own nail salon are also stuck because of the same barriers that workers who want to exit the industry face. And so what we we propose a variety of recommendations just from the explorations that we've done through our interviews and surveys. But most importantly, we see that there needs to be solutions that benefit both workers and small business owners. And this means more resources for folks and more resources that actually directly impact these workers and small business owners. One of the proposed methods includes providing a worker center, which would help build trust within the community to build relationships with workers that are already existing and identify what are their specific needs. And a more general recommendation is that we really encourage folks to think about what it means to have more bilingual and bicultural staff within government agencies that can more fully support workers and small business owners.
Jen, I want to ask you about the element of anti-Asian hate here. The report doesn't bring up some of the kind of atrocities that we've seen on national news reports. But at the same time, there's something about the way these workers are treated. Some of it could be racism, some of it could be the way a lot of us look down on people who make very little money. What's going on in these salons that makes this difficult for workers?
I think one of the challenges for workers is that they are generally undervalued in the industry. They've put in a lot of laborious physical labor into the work, and a part of the issue is that they are undervalued sometimes by consumers, and sometimes just the amount of effort that they put in is not recognized. And I think generally what we see with anti-Asian racism is this, we haven't entirely explored, but we've seen it in different contexts with the workers that we've have interviewed, where workers have experienced shouting or yelling by consumers, or sometimes there's cases where employees have faced customers who are unwilling to pay for services, and that puts them in a very difficult situation.
And finally, coming back to Thao, as far as the health risks, I know Boston's been somewhat better on this, but you know, you just smell those fumes from the materials they use in these salons. You have to wonder, what do these workers have to worry about?
Yeah, so I mean, there have been like multiple studies, not just nationally, but also in Boston specifically, that have pointed to the fact that there are many toxic fumes and chemicals within, you know, the nail salon products, within the dust that is created by filing nails, and also just, you know, the physical pain that Janet was mentioning, where like folks, where nail salon workers are like bending over customers all day long, sitting there and like meticulously caring for people's nails while also being hunched over and breathing in these chemicals, right? And previously, you know, folks had been like saying how personal protective equipment, which has been such a thing now, but back then was not as frequent or as common because of the fact that, you know, there just wasn't that much health information available to workers in the language that they needed it to be in. And also the fact that, you know, when workers wore masks before the pandemic, it was often questioned by consumers, like, why would you be wearing a mask, right? And so what we've seen during the pandemic is that folks have been more willing to wear masks, and that, you know, personal protective equipment has become more of a common staple. But as we're thinking about, you know, full reopening in the state, we also see the concern from both workers and small business owners about, you know, folks not wearing their masks all of a sudden, lifting restrictions too quickly, and that might put both workers and small businesses at risk of health and social distancing during this time.
Or more worries about ventilation as well. Finally, Tal, if people want to see this report, is there any way that they can find it online?
Yes, you can definitely find it on VietAID's Facebook page, but we have a special link as well to access the report. You can find it at bit.ly / from our own voices. From each letter of the word is capitalized. And then you can access it on VietAID's website using that link.
I'd like to thank you both very much for joining us, Thao Ho and Janet Vo from Greater Boston Legal Services and VietAID. We'll have more news in just a moment.